For the next 2 weeks on Days of Our Lives, Salem is heading into the kind of chaos that changes everything. Arrests are coming, gunfire is coming, secrets are getting heavier, and several relationships may not survive the pressure. What makes these March 16 through March 27 spoilers so compelling is that this is not just one big shock. It is multiple emotional disasters colliding at the same time. One mistake on the job could change a career. One hidden project could destroy trust inside a marriage. One manipulated bottle could send Holly even further out of control. And while all of that is happening, love in Salem remains just as messy and dangerous as ever. So let's break it all down, because these next 2 weeks look packed with fallout, fear, and emotional turning points. The first major turning point in these next 2 weeks is the fall of Owen Kent. After everything he has done, seeing him finally get caught and thrown in jail should bring at least some sense of justice. On paper, this is the moment where the immediate danger ends. The villain is contained, the threat is neutralized, Salem can finally breathe again. But on Days of Our Lives, the end of the physical danger is often only the beginning of the emotional fallout. Because while Owen may be locked up, the fear he unleashed does not simply disappear with him. Stephanie may be out of immediate danger, but that does not mean she is truly free from what happened. In fact, the real struggle may only be starting now. Once the chaos dies down and the adrenaline fades, she may be left alone with the full weight of the trauma. That is when the memories can hit harder. That is when the panic can become more real. And that is when even ordinary moments can start feeling unsafe. This is exactly why Stephanie's story could become even more powerful in the aftermath. She may try to put on a brave face. She may insist she wants to move on. She may not want people treating her like she is fragile. But emotional trauma does not follow a neat timeline, and it does not care how badly someone wants life to return to normal. A sudden fear response, a quiet shutdown, a change in the way she trusts people around her, all of that could start surfacing in subtle but heartbreaking ways. And that is what makes this more than just a rescue story. This could become a story about survival, recovery, and the hidden damage left behind after terror. At the same time, Alex may be facing a different kind of aftermath, one built on guilt rather than fear. Once the truth comes out and Alex realizes Jeremy Horton was innocent, the emotional blow should be brutal. In the heat of the crisis, Alex let panic and suspicion take over. He believed he had identified the threat, and he acted on that belief. But now he has to sit with the fact that he was wrong. And not just slightly wrong, devastatingly wrong. That is the kind of mistake that lingers. Because apologizing to Jeremy may be the easy part. Living with the knowledge that fear distorted his judgment when it mattered most is something else entirely. Alex may start replaying every moment in his head, wondering how he missed the truth, how fast he turned on the wrong person, and what that says about him under pressure. So while Owen's arrest may close one chapter, it opens 2 more, Stephanie's painful road to emotional recovery, and Alex's struggle to come to terms with a mistake he cannot simply undo. Then we have EJ DiMera, who once again finds himself right in the center of Salem's suspicion, scandal, and chaos. After that kiss with Kat Green, EJ's world is already complicated enough. There is romantic tension. There is emotional confusion. There is the growing sense that Kat may be getting pulled closer to a man she was never supposed to trust in the first place. And just as that dynamic starts getting more dangerous, everything escalates when Rafe arrests EJ over Stephanie's ordeal. This has all the ingredients of a classic Salem explosion. It is public. It is humiliating. It is dramatic. And perhaps most importantly, it gives everyone around EJ a reason to believe the worst about him all over again. That image alone, EJ in handcuffs, is powerful. In a town like Salem, perception can be just as damaging as the truth. Once people see someone like EJ being hauled in by the police, the narrative starts writing itself. Rumors spread, doubts grow louder, enemies feel vindicated, and even people who want to believe in him may begin to hesitate. The most fascinating part, though, is that EJ may not actually be guilty of ordering Owen to target Stephanie. If Owen acted independently after Dr. Wilhelm Rolf summoned him to Salem to watch over that mysterious glowing pod, then EJ may eventually be cleared. But that does not mean he escapes cleanly. On this show, legal innocence and public innocence are not always the same thing. Someone can beat the charge and still lose ground emotionally, politically, and personally. And that is where this storyline gets even stronger. Because EJ's arrest may not just affect his reputation, it may deepen every emotional complication already surrounding him. Kat, in particular, could be pulled into an even more impossible position. She is supposed to be focused on bringing EJ down. That is the role she should be playing. That is the mission. But feelings are beginning to interfere, and an arrest like this only makes everything messier. Why? Because scandal has a way of intensifying emotion. If Kat sees EJ as vulnerable, isolated, or unfairly blamed, that may deepen her emotional conflict instead of resolving it. She may find herself sympathizing with him at the exact moment she should be keeping her distance. She may tell herself she still sees clearly, but the more complicated EJ becomes, the easier it may be for her heart to override her judgment. And that is a dangerous place to be when dealing with a man like EJ DiMera. So even if the legal case weakens, the larger fallout may only be getting started. The arrest could stain EJ's image, fuel his enemies, and pull Kat even deeper into an emotional trap she may not be able to control. In Salem, sometimes the handcuffs come off long before the consequences do. One of the most emotionally loaded stories in these spoilers may not come from violence or romance at all. It may come from something quieter, and in some ways, more dangerous. Paulina's decision to deceive Abe over EJ's secret project could end up creating the kind of emotional damage that is much harder to repair than any public scandal. On the surface, Paulina's reasoning may sound understandable. She does not want Abe and Theo clinging to premature hope about Lexi possibly being alive. She does not want to open the door to crushing disappointment before there is real proof. From her perspective, this may feel less like dishonesty and more like emotional protection. But that is exactly what makes the situation so risky. Because in Salem, lies told with good intentions are often the ones that explode the hardest. Paulina may believe she is sparing Abe more pain. She may convince herself that waiting for certainty is the kindest choice. But what she is really doing is making an enormous emotional decision on Abe's behalf, deciding what he can handle, what he deserves to know, and when he is allowed to face a truth that directly affects his own heart. That is a dangerous line to cross in any marriage. Because if Abe later discovers that Paulina knew something this important and chose to keep it from him, the betrayal may cut far deeper than the lie itself. This is not just about withheld information. It is about trust. It is about agency. It is about the feeling that the person closest to you looked at your pain and decided to manage it for you instead of standing beside you in it. And that kind of hurt can shake a relationship at its foundation. What makes this storyline especially compelling is that Paulina is unlikely to see herself as the villain here. She may truly believe she is acting out of love. She may think she is protecting her family from a cruel emotional roller coaster. But love does not erase the damage secrets can do. In fact, when love is the reason for the deception, the fallout can feel even more painful because the betrayal comes wrapped in intimacy. That is why this plot has so much dramatic potential. If Abe finds out the truth later, especially after being allowed to believe there was nothing more to know, he may not just be upset. He may feel blindsided, humiliated, shut out of one of the most emotionally important developments imaginable. And once that crack forms between them, it may not be easy to repair. So while Paulina may think she is preventing heartbreak, she could actually be delaying it, magnifying it, and setting the stage for a much deeper emotional collapse later on. In other words, this may not be a lie that protects her marriage. It may be the lie that puts it in real danger. Another major storyline over these 2 weeks centers on JJ, Sean, Liam, and Klaus. And this one has all the ingredients of a classic Days of Our Lives pressure cooker. There is danger in the air, a violent confrontation looming, and one split-second mistake that could end up changing everything. Klaus following Liam already sets the tone for something serious. This is not a random encounter. This is the kind of setup where fear rises fast, choices have to be made instantly, and there is no room for hesitation. Once gunfire erupts, the situation becomes pure survival. In that kind of moment, every officer on the scene has to be sharp, steady, and fully present. But according to the spoilers, JJ freezes. And that is the detail that could turn this from a tense action scene into a devastating emotional turning point. Because this is not just a minor slip-up. This is not a harmless delay or a small misjudgment that can be brushed aside later. If JJ locks up in a critical moment and Sean has to step in, trade gunfire with Klaus, and ultimately take a bullet, then the consequences become immediate and deeply personal. Sean may survive the injury, and he probably will once he gets treatment at the hospital. But survival does not erase what happened in that moment. The bigger question becomes this: what exactly caused JJ to freeze? And that is where the storyline gets much more layered. If JJ's hesitation is tied to his past trauma, his history with Theo, and the fear of making another gunshot-related mistake, then this is not just about one bad moment on the job. It may be proof that JJ is still carrying psychological weight he has never fully worked through. Under normal circumstances, he may function well enough. But in a real-life crisis, when instinct has to take over, buried fear may still be controlling him more than he wants to admit. That possibility could shake JJ to his core. Because once the adrenaline fades and Sean is lying in a hospital bed, JJ may have no choice but to face the truth. He may start replaying the entire scene in his mind, the hesitation, the panic, the moment Sean had to move because he did not. And that kind of mental replay can be brutal. It can turn one mistake into a personal spiral of guilt, doubt, and self-questioning. That is why Sean later asking JJ to be honest feels so important. This conversation may not simply be about assigning blame. It may be about confronting whether JJ is truly fit to keep doing this work. Sean may want to know if JJ froze because of fear, because of trauma, or because some part of him is no longer able to handle the job when lives are on the line. That is a hard question for any officer to face, and even harder when the injured person asking it is your own partner. So this storyline may become about much more than a shootout. It may become a deep character reckoning for JJ. If he starts wondering whether he can still wear the badge with confidence, that internal struggle could be just as gripping as the gunfire itself. In other words, the bullet may hit Sean, but the emotional impact may hit JJ even harder. Over on the younger side of Salem, Holly's storyline is starting to look more and more troubling, and possibly much darker than it first appears. At this point, Holly is already spiraling. Her behavior is becoming more erratic, her emotional state seems increasingly unstable, and the people around her are being forced to react to a version of Holly that feels harder and harder to reach. On the surface, it may look like she is simply losing control. But the spoilers suggest there may be something much more sinister happening underneath. And that is where this story becomes genuinely disturbing. Rachel is being pressured by Sophia to pass along a skincare supplement bottle, and she gives it to Tate while pretending it is a gift from her. Even without context, that alone would feel suspicious. It is secretive, manipulative, and clearly designed to hide the truth about where the bottle really came from. But once Sophia's motive comes into focus, the storyline takes on an entirely different tone. Because Sophia does not just want Holly to have the bottle. She wants Holly to secretly receive more antipsychotic medication. That changes everything. Now this is no longer just a story about a young woman behaving unpredictably. It becomes a story about possible interference, manipulation, and a hidden attempt to influence Holly's state of mind without her knowledge. And if that is what is really happening, then Holly may not just be falling apart on her own. She may be being pushed further off balance by someone working behind the scenes. That possibility makes every outburst, every poor decision, and every emotional breakdown feel more ominous. Because if Holly becomes even wilder during the week of March 23 through 27, the people around her may blame her without realizing that there is another force worsening the situation. And that is what could make the fallout especially cruel. Holly could be judged, abandoned, or written off at the exact moment when she is actually being manipulated. Tate's role in all of this is what raises the emotional stakes even higher. He has been standing by Holly through the chaos. He has been patient. He has been loyal. He has tried to hold on even as things around her keep getting more volatile. But loyalty is not endless. There comes a point where even the most supportive person starts to wear down under constant stress, confusion, and emotional whiplash. That is why the question hanging over this storyline is so powerful. How much more can Tate take before he starts pulling away? If Holly keeps spiraling and Tate still does not know the full truth, he may start believing there is nothing left he can do. He may begin to feel helpless, exhausted, and emotionally drained. And once that happens, Holly could lose one of the few people still fighting to stay in her corner. That would make the storyline even more tragic, because the damage would not just come from Holly's behavior itself. It would come from the hidden manipulation behind it, and the fact that the people who love her may not understand what they are really watching. That is what makes this plot so compelling. It is not chaos for the sake of chaos. It is a slow-building emotional trap involving deception, secrecy, and the terrifying possibility that Holly's collapse is being quietly engineered while everyone else reacts too late. Rachel may not be the loudest or most explosive part of these spoilers, but emotionally, she could become one of the most important. Because while Salem's adults are getting pulled into arrests, secrets, romantic confusion, and manipulation, Rachel is a child standing in the middle of all that pressure. And that makes her storyline quietly heartbreaking. Marlena giving Rachel a comforting hug may seem simple on the surface, but moments like that usually mean much more than they first appear to. A hug like this suggests Rachel is carrying something heavy, something she may not fully know how to express, but is clearly feeling all the same. Whether it is anxiety over her upcoming hearing, fear over Kristen's possible move from Brady's apartment, or guilt over being dragged into Sophia's secret plan involving Holly, Rachel seems to be under emotional strain from multiple directions. And that is a lot for any child to handle. What makes this especially sad is that Rachel is being pulled into adult situations she should never have to navigate. She is being influenced, pressured, and used as part of schemes she is too young to fully understand. Even if the adults around her justify their actions, the emotional impact on Rachel could be very real. Children often absorb fear and guilt long before they have the words to explain it. That is why Marlena stepping in matters so much. Right now, Marlena may be the one person offering Rachel something stable, gentle, and emotionally safe. In a world where other adults are making selfish choices, panicking, or keeping dangerous secrets, Marlena's support could become a lifeline. She may be the person who notices Rachel is not just acting out or being moody, but actually struggling under pressure she was never meant to carry. And that could become incredibly important in the episodes ahead. Because if Rachel continues getting pulled deeper into lies and manipulation, the emotional toll may start to show more clearly. She may become more anxious, more withdrawn, more conflicted, or she may reach a point where she can no longer carry what she knows. And if that happens, Marlena may be the one who helps her feel safe enough to tell the truth. That possibility gives this storyline real weight. Rachel is not just a side character in someone else's scheme. She may become the emotional proof of how damaging adult choices can be when a child gets trapped in the middle of them. Her distress reflects something bigger: the cost of chaos when the people who are supposed to protect a child instead place burdens on her shoulders. So Marlena's hug is not just a tender grandmother moment. It may be the first sign that Rachel desperately needs help before all this pressure does lasting damage. The emotional entanglements do not stop there. Philip is set to make a confession to Gabby, and it will likely be a love declaration that Gabby returns. On the surface, that sounds romantic. But viewers already know the danger here. Gabby is keeping huge secrets, especially when it comes to the Titan DiMera merger and her alliance with Tony. So even if her feelings for Philip are real, this relationship may already be standing on unstable ground. And Theo's connection to that secret makes things even worse. If Theo lets something slip to Philip at some point, intentionally or not, the fallout could be enormous. That means this romance may be doomed before it ever gets the chance to settle. At the same time, Ari is reaching her limit where Holly is concerned. She lays down the law and makes it clear she cannot keep dealing with this behavior. But then Ari may shift into a softer role later, especially if Liam ends up injured or emotionally shaken after the shootout. That could bring Ari and Liam closer very quickly. Shared trauma has a way of creating emotional intimacy fast, so this may be the beginning of a deeper bond between them. As if Salem needed more romantic confusion, Leo and Dimitri may be pulled back into each other's orbit again in a very dramatic way. If Dimitri saves Leo from a shooter in Alemania, that heroic moment could leave Leo wondering whether Dimitri really is the man for him after all. That is the kind of emotional twist soaps love, danger creating unexpected clarity. But before that possibility can breathe, Andrew Donovan comes back on Issa business and corners Leo and Dimitri with plenty of questions. That means whatever fragile emotional shift is happening between them may immediately get buried under pressure, suspicion, and legal trouble. So once again, Salem gives us a relationship that might be reigniting at the exact worst possible moment. Finally, let's go back to Kat, because her storyline may quietly become one of the messiest of all. Kat is supposed to be focused on taking EJ down. That is the mission. That is the logic. That is the direction she should be moving in. But emotions are getting in the way. If Kat is truly falling for EJ, then every decision from this point forward becomes more dangerous. Feelings cloud judgment. Attraction weakens strategy. And once Chad returns down the road, the emotional pressure is only going to increase. That is why Kat may end up trapped between what she is supposed to do and what she is starting to feel. And in Salem, that kind of conflict usually ends in heartbreak, exposure, or both. So when you step back and look at these next 2 weeks as a whole, the pattern becomes clear. This is not just about one arrest, one shooting, or one shocking lie. It is about pressure exposing weakness. JJ may have to confront whether he can still do his job. Paulina may learn that even protective lies can destroy trust. Holly's spiral may be hiding something much darker underneath. And multiple romances may already be heading toward betrayal before they even have a chance to breathe. In other words, Salem is not slowing down. It is only getting more dangerous.